Hello and welcome back. It's season 2 of the Suffolk Pod Show. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode, and don't forget you can subscribe to the show for free through your favourite podcast directory or from our website.
Suffolk Pod Show is produced and managed by podtalk.co.uk. I'm Mark Mason.
And I'm Susanna Hornby. Episode 47. We're talking to Mark Murphy, MBE and Sony Gold Award winner and BBC Radio Suffolk breakfast show presenter. And here he is. It's Mark Murphy. Welcome, Mark, to the show.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me here. It's very odd being on the receiving end of questions rather than being the one that asks them every day. So you'll have to rate me and see how I do turning the tables on me.
Well, that did occur to me, actually, and I was thinking, how often do you actually get interviewed?
Very, very rarely. I think probably... I was interviewed not that long ago by Lesley Dolphin, who's my wife, our afternoon presenter at BBC Radio Suffolk after I was awarded the MBE. So she invited me onto her virtual sofa, and I can't remember the last time someone interviewed me. It was really strange, really odd.
Well, I'm half
good fun.
I'm half expecting you to take over, so just feel free, feel comfortable.
No worries.
Where shall we start? There's so much to talk about. So I thought I'd leave it to you. Where would you like to start, from the beginning or the end?
The beginning is a very good place to start. So I'm a local boy. I was born in Ipswich. I grew up on Priory Heath in Ipswich, lived in a council house with mum and dad. Not the best of starts in life. Mum and dad's relationship was pretty stormy, to say the very least. So I used to take a lot of solace in listening to radio. So I grew up listening to a little bit of Radio Caroline. My favourite was Radio Luxembourg, and I loved Tony Blackburn when he was on Radio 1, and he had Arnold the dog, and I had this image of him going into work, being able to take his big Alsatian dog in there, and it was so well behaved. Every time he'd say something, Arnold, it'd go woof woof, and I thought, this is really neat. Now, of course, I realise, sorry to break it to you, that he was just a sound effect, but I used to take a lot of solace in that, and it took me away from what was not a great childhood at times, and I always wanted to be a radio presenter. Right
from the beginning. Talking about that relationship with your parents, I'd like to talk about that later and about the Lighthouse charity, if that's okay. But coming back to that, so
of course.
You thought, I want to be a radio presenter. So what did you do?
Well, I went to the grammar school. I passed the 11 plus, and I didn't know how to make the most of going to a grammar school. No one from my family or from the estate that I lived in had ever gone there before. And so it was just a major achievement. Oh, Mark's gone to the grammar school. And so there was no question of me staying on for sixth form or anything at all. So I was told by my parents when I said I want to be a radio presenter. Well, I can remember Mum clearly saying to me, well, that's lovely, dear, but why don't you go and get a proper job first and get some qualifications? And you'll always have something to fall back on. And it's fairly wise advice, really. So I left school and went into the motor trade. And one day I was walking along Norwich Road in Ipswich in my early 20s, and Whitmore's music store, no longer there, just recently closed, had got lots of disco equipment in the window. So I went in, and they got this marvellous display upstairs. And so I came out with a disco tucked metaphorically under my arm. And that was how it all started. I was going to go out and do birthdays and weddings and that kind of thing. So I set that up in my bedroom at home, where it was just me and Mum living there at the time. Dad had moved out. And so I would practice in the evenings with my disco equipment. And I had the lights, the machine that made the lights flash, I had a smoke machine and a bubble machine, all going in my bedroom. And Mum was not very impressed with that and encouraged me to get out there and do it for real. So we hired the Suffolk Punch pub on Norwich Road in Ipswich, the upstairs room, on a Friday night. Put a buffet on and charged friends and family £5 to come and watch me perform. And I was so nervous, I didn't speak all night, apart from when this taxi driver came to the front of the disco and said, "Taxi for Kersey," which was a family that lived a couple of doors away. And I said, "Oh, they're over there at the bar." And he said, "I haven't got time to go hunting, boy." He said, "You announce it." I said, "I can't, it's my first time." So anyway, I plucked up the courage and opened up the microphone and said, in a very high-pitched voice, "Taxi for Kersey." And everybody cheered and applauded. That's all I said all night, and that's how it began.
And that's where the legend started. Do you still get teased about that, or is that long gone?
There are family members who bring that up from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it was really quite scary to stand up in front of people, and school friends will tell you that when I was at school, if we had to stand up in front of the class, I was the last one to volunteer. So, how on earth I plucked up the courage to do that, I have no idea. But yeah, went on from there.
Yeah, but you did, and you know, obviously that you don't have that anymore, or maybe you do. Maybe you do still have.
No, I don't. No, I sold that in late 1980s, and only 4 years ago I decided that I would sell my entire record collection because I hadn't got anything to play them on. Only now, of course, the vinyl revival means they would have probably been worth 4 or 5 times what I sold them for, but that's the story of my life. And so I joined Hospital Radio, and I did that from about 1987. Got a program on there, really, really enjoyed it. Got into difficulties on my first program because I played what I now know were fairly inappropriate records. We used to go down to the ward and come back with requests. And so for my first program, which was a Sunday night, I went and got some requests. There was about 6 requests for a 2-hour program. So I had to choose extra music. So I chose a Frank Sinatra song, a nice long song by Don McLean because I was a little bit nervous and might need to nip to the loo, and played the songs, and the show I thought was okay. And the program controller came up to me at the end and said, really good show. He said, but the music you chose was really wrong. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, Frank Sinatra. And I said, well, there's nothing wrong with Frank Sinatra. It's really middle of the road. He said, yeah, but you played My Way. And I said, I don't understand what you mean. And he said, well, look, think about it. You're lying in a hospital bed. You're waiting for an operation. You're waiting for test results. And My Way comes on the radio. And I said, I don't understand. And then he sung the lyrics, of course. And now the end is near. And so I face the final curtain. And the Don McLean song that I played was American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee because this is the day that I died. And I thought it was really cool with my music choices, but they were not the best, no, in hindsight.
But you kept the job.
Yeah. Well, it's a volunteering role, and they kept me on, and I did that for 2 or 3 years. And then I saw in the East Anglian Daily Times that there was talk of BBC Radio Suffolk opening up. And so I thought, I want to work there. And so I rang up the head of the BBC in the South and East and explained who I was and what I wanted to do. And he said, it's very nice of you to ring up. He said, but we haven't got a building, we haven't got an editor, we haven't got anything yet. He said, just keep an eye out in the local press for job adverts. So that's what I did. Yeah. And I applied for every single job here at BBC Radio Suffolk. I watched it being built and got no interviews at all for the jobs here. So I paid to send myself on 2 radio production courses at Sound FM in Leicester. I was working at a garage at the time. I was selling stuff at the local Mercedes-Benz dealership. So I got a good job with good prospects and a nice car. So paid to go on these courses. And on the last day of the last course was how to write a letter that will get you work in radio. And I thought, well, I've written loads of those. Well, good job I stayed because it said, I'm prepared to do anything. I'm prepared to work on sociable hours, etc., etc. The one thing I hadn't written in my letter was I'm prepared to work for free, i.e. as a volunteer. So I said that in this next letter that I wrote, and 2 days later they called me in and said, look, we've got no jobs, but we can give you your break and get your foot in the door, and it's up to you to make the most of it. So I've basically had my foot in the door for 31 years. Yeah. And so I came in and made the tea for Stuart White, who's recently finished on Look East. He used to do our Sunday mid-morning programme, and I'd make the tea and answer the phones as a volunteer on his show. And he was fantastic, and he taught me lots and lots and lots about the industry. And that was my foot in the door. And
from there, could never have dreamed to have the job you have today.
No, not at all. So I was just really, really grateful to be in the building, spending some time in a radio environment, the environment that I've always wanted to live and work in. And, as I said, I got a really good job. And so I learned to use the studio desk. I used to help out on outside broadcasts. And my first BBC paycheck was November 1990, and I've still got it at home. It's a beautiful check, proper BBC check.
Yeah.
And they wanted someone they were doing a program from Christchurch Park firework display in Ipswich. Fireworks on the radio, in hindsight, probably not a good thing to do. But my job was to carry the backpack transmitter. And I had this backpack on my back, and I looked like a Ghostbuster. All the kids coming up saying, oh, look, it's a Ghostbuster. So I walked around the park for 2 hours with this on my back, and I got a check for £15. And I thought, I'm never going to get any more. So I never cashed it, and I never have to this day. So I've got it framed at home as my first £15 paycheck, because I genuinely didn't think that I would ever have a career. And then I learned to use the studio desk, and I did some dummy programs. I did Saturday breakfast for a couple of weeks, and then they were looking to find someone to host the early breakfast show at 5 a.m. And they literally couldn't find anybody. And I'd done it a few times as holiday cover. And I said, I'll do it. And they went, no, I'll do it. So in the end, they could not find anybody else. And I went to my bosses at Lancaster's, the Mercedes dealers, and said, look, I've got this opportunity. And they said, look, they were really lovely, actually. They said, look, we know how much this means to you. Go and make a success of it with our blessing. But if it doesn't work, come back, we'll have you back. So I changed careers at 27. So from a secure job in a very large garage chain, I would have gone on to be a dealership manager or something like that. That was the career path, to go into the relatively shaky world of show business. So that was a nice security blanket for me at 27 with a mortgage to allow me to make that change.
Yeah. And had you met Lesley by this point?
Lesley, it's funny, Lesley Dolphin is my wife, and at this point, she was starting work at BBC Radio Suffolk as well, and so we were vying for the same programmes and jobs, so there was a little bit of a competitive edge between us, and there was obviously a spark there that we didn't realise would blossom into something else, but we would have some interesting conversations at times about who was doing what. We were on the scene, but not together.
Not together at that point.
No.
So early morning breakfast show, I mean, that is a hard gig, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Early morning radio is a wonderful time to be on the radio, and I think I know some people like late night radio, but I like early morning radio because you are often the first voice that someone hears. You're waking them up and you're telling them that the world is still spinning. Will they need to have a different way to work with the travel news? Will they need an umbrella to go to work? And hopefully putting a smile on their face at the same time. So it's a special time of the day, but a 3:30 alarm call isn't much fun. It curtails a lot of stuff that you'd probably like to do in the evening the night before. Yeah. But it's worth it for being on the radio at a special time of the day. So I did the early show for probably about 2 years. And then in the early 90s, the BBC local radio switched towards much more of a news output. And so I went to go and work in the newsroom. And so I ended up producing programs, reading the news. And then in 1998, I was given the drive time show. So I was combining my presentation skills with the newly found new skills to do the drive time show. Did that for 2 years. And then was offered the breakfast show first time in 2000. It was very interesting because the editor at the time said, I'd like to talk to you after your program, please. I'm going to take you up the pub. And normally when someone talks to you after a show, it's kind of like, well, thanks ever so much for what you've done, but we don't need you anymore. So I was fully anticipating that kind of conversation. Sat down at the Greyhound near where we work, and he bought me a pint and said, I want you to go and do the breakfast show. And I just went rather pale and went, okay, then I'll do it. And for everything that I really ever wanted. And I went home and apparently looked as white as a sheet, as if I had been sacked. I said, no, I've been given the breakfast show.
Well, it is the job, isn't it? To be honest,
it is the job. Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah, on any radio station to host the breakfast show is absolutely amazing. And for me to do it on the station that is my local station is extra special. And I've been able to work my way through to doing that at my own station that is really special.
Yeah. And here we are, 22 years later.
Yeah.
And you are just part of Suffolk's every day, every morning. What you just said was really interesting. No, it's so important. It's real responsibility to know that you are actually going to set the mood and day for so many people. Especially when
the pandemic hit. It was really, really important that, I hope that I'm a trusted voice. And lots and lots of people said to me and still say to me, you don't know how special it was to know that you were there on the radio first thing in the morning during the course of lockdown and the pandemic, because I was still there. I was the constant in their world that was turning upside down, and I was still there every morning and telling people what was happening, but also trying to relieve some of the stress and entertain at the same time, so it wasn't too heavy, because it was really a horrible time to live through. But just having that consistent voice, and along with Kelly who reads the news, lots of people said just hearing you two in the morning and Steph who does the travel, familiarity was something really special to hold on to.
And of course, there was no lockdown for you. You just carried on.
Yeah, it was. It was just like I say normal day. It wasn't a normal day, but I was coming in and out. And actually, for me, that was really good because I felt that I was contributing something to help people get through it. And trying to make a difference to people that needed a helping hand. We were able to put people in contact with others and highlight lots of the fantastic groups that were set up across Suffolk. So actually, I felt really happy that I was there doing that, and felt that I was hopefully contributing to make it better and more for people to be able to deal with it more easily than they would have been if I wasn't there.
But you did. I mean, I know it sounds a bit coarse to say, but BBC Radio Suffolk listenership figures ballooned.
BBC Local Radio as a whole, actually, over the last 2 years. I think BBC Local Radio, I think, is very special. I think there's nothing else like it on the radio dial. We care about where we live. The vast majority of us were born here or have lived here a long time. We live in the community. We are part of the community, so we care passionately about what we do. And that's the same for all of our sister stations up and down the country. And the audience figures went up. And traditionally, people will turn to us in times of trouble. So if there's snow, high winds, floods, those kind of things, people tune in. It's our challenge to be as relevant to them, even on quiet days when nothing's happening. And that's when you earn your money, when there's not much going on. And Suffolk is thankfully a relatively quiet newscast. So you have to work hard at it some days. But lots of people tuned in, and the feedback has been amazing from people. We've had lots of lovely emails and letters, and nice recognition from the Lord Lieutenant of Suffolk for the work that we did as well, with a special citation, and another one from Suffolk Police as well for similarly for what we did. So I think we did well.
It is all those connections, and there is some small stuff in there, but you have done some big stuff too. I mean, some of the campaigns that you've launched through your show have had a huge effect on the whole county.
Yeah, they have. I remember having a conversation with the controller of BBC Local Radio, a chap called Andy Griffey, when I first started doing the breakfast show. And he just said to me, he said, "Oh, what are you working on?" And I just said, "Well, the news of the day." He said, No, what are you working on? What do you mean? And he'd just been to Radio Nottingham, and Nottingham at the time had a huge problem with gun crime. And he said to the team at Radio Nottingham, "What are you doing to combat that?" And they said, "Well, we can't do anything with the BBC." And he said, "Well, of course you can. There's all sorts that you can do to highlight the issues and try and reduce it. Who is going to complain about you trying to make Nottingham a better place to live?" And he said that to me, and that was kind of like the penny dropped. And so after a while, once I got my feet under the table, I was able to look at various different things. So we launched our Don't Be a Tosser anti-litter campaign, which was fabulously successful. I'd driven along the A14 and seen the disgusting rubbish in the laybys, in one, just by the Orwell Bridge, which is next to the Bridgewoods Nature Reserve. It was knee deep. And I came into work and said to my boss that we're going to have to do something about this. And my friends had come back from Australia and where they used Don't Be a Tosser. And we said, "Can we use that?" And he went, "Yeah, of course you can." So we partnered up with East Anglian Daily Times. We wanted something that would grab the attention. We wanted something that would appeal and hopefully strike a chord with those people who were tossing stuff out their car windows. So we were aiming fairly and squarely at those people. And it really worked. It inspired lots of people to do litter picks, and still to this very day, they're doing them. And it was a bit ahead of its time, really. Yeah, it lasted for many, many years, and people still talk to me about it. And as I say, the groups that went off and were inspired to clear up are still going strong, and others have set up as well. And some people say to me, "Well, it's still messy." And I said, "Well, yeah, you imagine what it'd been like if we hadn't have done what we did. We would all be knee deep in it."
It is extraordinary why people, I don't really understand why people think that is okay to throw your bag of takeaway out. It's extraordinary.
It isn't really. Yeah, it isn't at all. And you drive along our main routes, and it's fast food and bottles and stuff, and it was just absolutely disgusting. And when we cleaned this lay-by, we invited listeners and staff to come and clean this lay-by up, and out of it we pulled 200 bin bags of litter from this one lay-by.
Wow.
And there were all sorts of things in there. And the thing we uncovered was, and you might have seen them on the side of the road, were bottles of urine. So lorry drivers would pee in the bottle and just lob it out the window.
Yeah.
And one of my colleagues, bless her, Debbie, stood on one of these and it shot right up her leg. And it's just, it's that you just think, what is the mentality of someone that wants to do that? So that really struck a chord. That was a really popular campaign. I decided one day, I'd read that St Edmund used to be our patron saint of England.
Yeah.
And so I said to my producer, Emily, just sound people out and see if we should try and get him his old job back. So she did. An hour later came back and said, everybody's really keen. They're really up for it. So we launched a huge campaign. We took it to 10 Downing Street and, tried to get him his old job back. We failed nationally, but Suffolk County Council rode in on their white charger and said, no, he can be our patron saint. But it was great fun. We had sausages. We named the train St Edmund. There were beers. It was just... great fun, and his name is much bigger and brighter. Since we did that, and that was really exciting to do. And then following on from that was. But the other thing was Suffolk Day. So I was doing an interview with someone from Yorkshire about Yorkshire Day and just said on air, well, why don't we have a Suffolk Day? And again, we went off and made some phone calls. And so we created Suffolk Day, and it's now this year in its 6th year. And is firmly rooted in the calendar. So, yes, campaigning and promoting Suffolk, but very carefully because the BBC has guidelines and I have to stick within those.
Of course.
But yeah, it's been great fun. We live in a great county and I'd like to think I've contributed a little bit to make it a little bit better.
You have, en masse, Mark. You certainly have. And you keep doing it. I mean, hence and why you are an MBE, as they say, now being recognised for your work and for all of that community work too. There's so much more, but I'm now that I've mentioned that MBE, can we talk about it? Well, how did you know? How did you find out?
I came home from work at the end of November on a Friday afternoon, and I was pushing my way into the front door, and there was a letter blocking the doormat. And I was cursing at this letter, and then it said Cabinet Office on the front, and my immediate thought is, who have I upset? What have I done? Because I've got a reputation for doing some tough interviews. And I sat down and I thought, I'll open it up. And then it said, you've been nominated for an MBE. And I just sat there gobsmacked, absolutely gobsmacked. And Lesley came home from work and I said, has anybody been pumping you for information about me? She said, no. I said, are you sure? And she said, why? I said, well, I've had this letter. And she just grinned. And unbeknown to me, it'd been going on the application for 3 years. I've subsequently found out it's a listener that started the ball rolling 3 years ago, and obviously they got letters and testimonials together, and it was enough to get me the MBE, which I never dreamed in a million years. If you remember that little kid that grew up in a council house on Priory Heath to end up being awarded something in the Queen's New Year's Honours was just jaw-dropping, and it hasn't sunk in yet, I don't think, to be honest. It really hasn't. I mean, it's lovely, and I'm really honoured, and I'm so pleased and chuffed, and my family are, but it hasn't quite sunk in, I don't think.
You can't ask for sort of extra specials at home, though. You can't actually wave that stick around yet. I have an MBE, don't you know?
No, just the odd little curtsy now and again or something.
Yes, keeping it real.
I'm very, my friends and colleagues will tell you, I am very down to earth. My feet are firmly on the ground and I don't forget my roots. And I think that's really important, actually.
No.
Really important.
You obviously don't. And it is extraordinary, all of those achievements. For the campaigning and stuff. Mark, I want to ask you about Lesley more and when you fell in love and married, but there's quite a story about getting married, I believe.
Oh, well, yes. So it was a workplace romance. Let's just leave it at that. And we moved in together. Leslie's got 2 sons. And so we moved in together and we lived together for a few years. And we kind of talked about getting married and, we'll get round to it at some point. And so one afternoon I was at home and we were desperate for a holiday, half-term February holiday. And so we went into the travel agents and booked up to go to Las Vegas for a week. And when I was at home flicking through the brochure, I saw these wedding packages in the back of the brochure. And I rang the number and they answered and I put the phone down. The next day I rang the number again and said, I'm coming to Vegas for a week in February, Valentine's week. What are the chances of getting married on Valentine's Day? And this was only about 5 or 6 weeks beforehand. And they said, don't think so, not Valentine's Day. And you wouldn't want it anyway because it's a production line, da-da-da-da-da, but we can do you the 15th. So I said, okay, let's do it. And Lesley had no idea that I was doing any of this. So I hunted around and got all the relevant paperwork that we needed. I went to Croydon's in Ipswich. My friend was the manager and got an engagement ring and a wedding ring. And
sorry, you haven't even asked her to marry you yet.
No.
Okay.
She had absolutely no idea this was going on. So I did all this behind her back, got everything ready. She got a cream dress and cream shoes, so I packed those in my suitcase.
Gosh.
And on our last day at work before we flew the next day, people here knew we were going, and they were laughing and joking and slipping records into her running order, like Chapel of Love and Love and Marriage and all this kind of stuff, just as a joke. And as I left work on the Friday, I went and spoke to the editor and told him what had been going on. He said, "Oh, that's really funny, isn't it?" I went, "Well, actually, we are getting married next week, but don't tell anybody because even she doesn't know yet. I'll let you know if she says yes." So I proposed at the airport, and thankfully she said yes.
Gosh.
And then so we got married on February the 15th at the Little Chapel of Flowers in Las Vegas, just the two of us.
I love
with
that.
Kelly, the Virgin Holidays rep, as our witness.
Great.
And it was brilliant. The only thing she said to me when she said yes was, "It's not Elvis, is it?" And I went, "No, it's not Elvis." And it was in the early days of the internet, so they had a webcam in the corner of the chapel, so everybody back here had the link. We didn't realise how many people had been shared the link here. We thought it was just family, but BBC Radio Suffolk had shared the link to everybody. So there was hundreds and hundreds of people watching us on this webcam get married in Las Vegas. And my poor old mum, she was quite elderly at the time, and so my brother took her computer around and set it up in the kitchen so she could sit at the kitchen table and watch her little boy getting married in Las Vegas. And we came back, and we were thinking it had only been a quiet thing, which it was for us. But it was a local media storm here. It was in the East Anglian Daily Times, and the radio station had broadcast it all. But yeah, thankfully she said yes.
Yes, otherwise that could have gone rather wrong.
It would have been a funny holiday if she'd said no.
Yeah. I think you might, let's not even think about that, because it didn't happen. So when was that?
That was 2001.
Right, okay.
So it's 20 odd years ago now, but a very special day. Very special day, actually. And Las Vegas has got a special place in our heart. So perhaps we'll go back one day and renew our vows. I don't know. Yeah,
I was about to ask if you've been back.
Been back once, and we went back to the little chapel and just sat there and had a moment.
Yeah.
And it sounds really tacky going to Vegas, but actually when you're there in the moment and it's just the two of you, we'd both been married before, it was very special. It was very special. And the Reverend made it very personal as well. So even though they'd known us for 10 minutes.
Dear. Well, I mean, I think that's wonderful. The thought of doing that would terrify me because I'm a planner, but I just think that's wonderful. Great story.
Yeah.
Great. Let's move on a little bit. You mentioned a stormy relationship between your mother and father, and I obviously don't want to go into that. It occurred to you that that you had fairly a traumatic childhood, and that's led to you working a lot and supporting the Lighthouse charity.
Yes, I do. So I'm patron of Lighthouse, which is a domestic abuse charity, and well, it's no secret. So I had a father that he was in the SAS in the Second World War. I don't know what he went through. I'm not condoning or excusing anything that he did, but he was very jealous of my mum, who was a good-looking woman, and she was faithful and nothing was going on. But he would go out drinking on a Friday night, Saturday night, and come back. And I would sit at the top of the stairs, cuddling the banister, holding my breath, waiting for this shouting and abuse to stop, or I would lie on the floor trying to hear what was happening underneath and wait for it to calm down and stop. So eventually she stayed with him until I was 16 or 18. I can't remember which it was now. But anyway, once we reached that stage, she divorced him. And he moved into a sheltered accommodation, but she would go and look after him and do his shopping. So she still loved him, he loved her, but they just couldn't live together. And so that was my upbringing. So that was, horrible really when I think about it. And I did some work with Lighthouse. They were producing a book a few years ago, and I talked quite openly to them and on air about what happened to me, and they asked me if I would be patron. So in memory of my mum and what she had to put up with, she was a very strong woman, I do it in her memory and in her name. So anything that I can help to raise awareness of domestic abuse issues, then I do. Because I think it's just, abusive relationships, be they same-sex, heterosexual relationships, whatever, abusive relationships, there's no place for it. There really is no place for it. No. And it's got to stop. Got to stop.
Well, we will read out the contact details for Lighthouse at the end of this podcast, so I hope that helps. On to something else now. Shall we talk about football?
We can.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Because you are one of Ipswich Town Football Club's most massive fans. Am I right?
I can't believe it. When I say now, I've been supporting them 50 years. I know that seems really odd when I say that, because I'm 57 now, so I've been supporting them about 50 years. It makes me sound like a grand old supporter.
I'm saying nothing.
Now. Yeah, I know. It only feels like yesterday. I've supported them pretty much all my life. I was an Arsenal fan when I first started getting into football, but quickly realised that it's your hometown club that you need to support. And so, it's about 50 years I've been supporting them now. And season ticket holder, don't go and watch them too much away because of work, but just love Ipswich Town. They put me through it most weeks, of course, like other fans. It's difficult being a Town fan at times, but I've had some great moments. Lucky enough through my job to have hosted a Saturday lunchtime sports show, which was Life's a Pitch.
Yes.
It only stopped when the pandemic hit. And I would host that with Kevin Beattie, Ipswich Town's greatest ever player. After his death with Terry Butcher, again, another great Ipswich Town player. And so here I am as a journalist and a reporter, presenter, working alongside my idols. And I'm saying, do you think you could sign this for me? So it's really quite odd that... and then Kevin Beattie would ring me up and say, what do you think of the match, Murph, and all this kind of stuff. And so that was the ultimate for me to work with these guys. And a lot of the ex-players would come on the show and tell us the most wonderful stories.
Yeah, I bet.
Stories I daren't repeat here.
Go on.
Or anywhere else.
No, because they're private. You can say anything here.
When the microphones were off, and when the red light was off, was when they told the great stories.
Right.
So that was an honour and a privilege. And, I'm like every other Town fan, desperate for them to get back up to where they should be, really.
Yeah.
It's...
I know, it's been a rough old ride, she says, pretending to know what she's talking about football.
But you support your team through thick and thin.
Yes, you do.
And I've seen quite a lot of thin in recent years. And I could do with a bit more thick, really.
Hey, don't worry. I had to support Blackburn Rovers because I lived up there. So I'm with you.
It happens, doesn't it?
It does.
It happens.
1 minute you're at the top, and then Alan Shearer leaves, and it's all over. Red Rover, as they used to say.
Yes, indeed.
I was looking at all sorts of things that you've done. I mean, you do so much work in the community, and I know that recently you've been promoting our coastline and particularly our fishing.
Again, it's something that I'm passionate about. As I said, I'm trying very hard and passionate about trying to, in my own way, as much as I can, to improve where we live and to make it a better place. And we've got a fantastic coastline, and we don't eat herring is the basic line here. And we used to eat a lot of herring, and we've got a fishing industry that's nowhere near what it used to be on the Suffolk coast. And so at the latter part of last year, we did a special programme. We called it Herring Aid. See what we've done there? Herring Aid.
Yeah, see that.
And we hosted it from the docks in Lowestoft with loads of old fishermen telling the stories of what it used to be like in Lowestoft with the smokehouses and people having kippers and herring. And really evocative. We had shanty boys singing along, and we wanted to try and encourage people to try herring again. It's a natural resource off our Suffolk coast. It's out there. It's billions of them off our coast. They're not worth catching. No one's eating them. Well, a few people still are, but not really in great numbers. And so we wanted to raise awareness of that as an issue and encourage people to try herring again. And talking to various fishmongers after we did that, it worked. But I think we've got a long way to go to rekindle that love of herring. But it's cheap, good for you, plentiful. Why wouldn't you? Another show we did recently was about the Suffolk Punch, again, an endangered species on the red list. We went and took the show to the Suffolk Punch Trust and hosted it there because they'd got a new artificial insemination unit that they'd set up. So we spent 4 hours talking about celebrating the wonderful Suffolk Punch, So this county's got so much to offer. And I think some of the issues that we have had in the past, and I think it's that we don't shout enough about what we have here. And it's a unique Suffolk way. Almost we want to protect it for ourselves. But there is so much here, like the Suffolk Punch, the herring industry, St Edmund, Cardinal Wolsey. Very soon we're going to be doing lots in Ipswich about Cardinal Wolsey. There's a lot going on here. And I just think as a county we need to perhaps shout about it a bit more, I think.
I've heard that so many people say, the secrets of Suffolk, but we're not. We aren't good enough at shouting about it and talking about ourselves.
No, we're not. No. And we need tourism. We need people to come in. But then it's a fine balance, isn't it, between having too many and spoiling the county for the very reason that people come here. I remember donkeys years ago, Maureen Lipman did a program, on a segment on the holiday program, all about Southwold. And I went on air the next morning on the breakfast show and said, oh, wasn't it wonderful? And we had people ringing up saying, no, we don't want everybody coming. We don't want them all here. We don't want it like Blackpool.
We want it both ways, don't we, basically? We want the best, it's a
fine balance.
It is a fine balance. And, I mean, we don't even have a motorway. And I think that people just go up the M1, they miss us out, probably.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Not so bad.
Yeah.
Right. Now, what's coming up? I've got here, what are your plans for the next few months? And I know you've got some funny stories from the past and you're not going to tell us, but I'm looking here at April Fool's Day. Now, this is a big thing.
Yeah, I love April Fool's Day, and it's one of my favourite times for being on air. Whether we're going to do something this year or not, wait and see. It's on a Friday. I'm not sure yet. You have to be a little bit careful these days. But in the past, I sent Lesley Dolphin down to the waterfront in Ipswich and read the news at 6 o'clock in the morning when I was doing Saturday breakfast and said, and finally a dolphin has been spotted at the wet dock in Ipswich. Of course, I wasn't lying. It was true. There was a dolphin there, and loads of people went to go and visit the dolphin, and she had a big badge on saying Lesley Dolphin. And even someone who works on one of our wet fish stalls in Suffolk brought down a bag of wet fish for the dolphin in case it was hungry in the docks. We had calls from people saying, of course it's not a story. You know, have you never seen a harbour porpoise before?
Oh, yeah.
And then I had a call from a Look East reporter at the time and said, I've just heard your news. Shall we send a camera crew down? And I was very new and I said, oh no, and I explained what was going on. But if I took that call now, I might say, yes, bring one down. So you never know. We've done all sorts of things. We had some Estonian Lurpaloof, which is anagram of April Fool, Estonian Lurpaloof birds that had landed on the Cornhill in Ipswich, and they were absolutely exhausted. And we had the RSPB on. Please come down with a loaf of bread. Please come and help them out. And what I'd actually done under cover of darkness at 3 o'clock in the morning was placed 1,000 yellow ducks on the Cornhill in central Ipswich. So when people turned up, there were these Estonian Lurpaloof ducks there for them to see, but clearly they weren't keen on the bread. So there are loads more. But it's a good time to be on the radio.
Yeah.
BBC tradition with spaghetti trees, of course.
Yes, of course. That's great. I cannot believe people actually thought that. But anyway, but then that was early days of television even, so, you know. It
was. Yeah. So coming up, we're going to be working with the RNLI this year. We're going to be running a campaign called Sea Sense, and we'll be working closely with the RNLI about beach safety and water safety. And so we'll be running that not just for BBC Radio Suffolk, but for BBC England. So all of our local radio stations hopefully will be taking that campaign around the UK coastline. So that'll be a big thing to watch out for this summer. And of course, Suffolk Show's back. Looking forward to that.
Yes.
We've got Suffolk Day from Framlingham, and we've got the Jubilee weekend. So there's lots to come. Lots to come this year. It's a really exciting year.
It feels like a sort of celebration year where we hope, as we come out of this, final stage of the pandemic, that things might get back to normal. Or have I just cursed it?
No, I hope not. I think we'll be okay.
Yeah,
I think we'll be okay.
I hope so.
I hope so too, unless some other horrible variant pops up. But you're right. It does feel like we've had 2 years of hell, and we do need to kind of go out and just, say hi to people again and appreciate where we live. And there'll be some great opportunities to do that this year in Suffolk. So.
Well, sadly, we're going to have to leave it there, Mark. But thank you so much for spending some time with us. It's a real honour to have you with us.
Oh, bless you.
No, I mean, we mean it, totally mean it, and it's been really interesting. And look forward to listening to you again tomorrow morning and hopefully seeing you soon.
Well, thank you very much. And as I said, it was a very strange feeling being interviewed and not doing the interviewing, but I've really enjoyed it. So you've done really well.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Cheers, Mark. Take care. Bye-bye.
You take care.
To contact Lighthouse, visit their website, lighthousewa.org.uk, or for advice, call 01473 228 270. Thanks for listening to the Suffolk Pod Show. Find us on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram, or you can visit our website, podtalk.co.uk. And here's our disclaimer.
The Suffolk Pod Show will not be held responsible for any omissions or errors in its podcast.
The Suffolk Pod Show is produced purely for entertainment purposes. Views and opinions are that of our own or that of our guests.